Ray tracing has been around for a few years now, its promised shift in the direction of realism tempered by subpar performance, demands for expensive hardware, and an ever-present perception that all ray tracing does is make surfaces shinier. However, it's inarguable that ray tracing improves visuals more than in how we perceive light rays on screen, but in shadow and reflections too, and how all this lighting interacts with environments. The technology is steadily improving. Performance is still hampered, mind you, but developers can utilize the tech more efficiently than other techniques like rasterization during the game creation process, with spectacular results now more commonplace than they were a few years ago. This is the fourth feature we've published centering on ray tracing, so if your chosen pinnacle of real-time lighting isn't featured here, it's likely on another, like arguably the most impressive ray trace game around, Metro Exodus. Alan Wake 2. Alan Wake 2's evocative atmosphere and surreal art design is made altogether more unsettling by ray tracing. Of course, enjoying all of ray tracing benefits plus DLSS 3.5 is computationally taxing even on PCs with high-end GPUs. That said, Remedy Entertainment have done a decent job implementing ray tracing on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, that the step towards an ultra realism looks good on console. PC is definitely where it's at though. Tweaking your GPU settings to the same as PS5 yields almost double the gameplay performance.
Deputy, I want the body taken back to town for a proper examination ASAP.
Well, sure, but the coroner won't be back in town for another week.
Surfaces are glossier, of course, but it's those additional reflections, an outside window reflecting an internal picture frame, for example, that demonstrate Alan Wake 2's exceptional graphics. Diablo 4. Diablo 4 shipped without ray tracing, but a March 2024 update brought ultra high and low settings for ray trace shadows and reflections with a significant dip in frame rate. For ray tracing's part, when engaged, it provided decent visual improvement, especially in Diablo 4's murkier environments. However, a stuttering frame rate hovering in the mid-40s might not be worth the sacrifice. Thankfully, March's update adds frame regeneration too, which is capable of boosting frame rates without upscaling or noticeable drops in visual fidelity. The truth is, Diablo 4's baked-in lighting and shadow detail already look decent, although ray tracing does edge up the game's visuals nicely. Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Amongst Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora's best features is its gorgeous presentation, giving joy to existing in these alien landscapes despite having to drudge through the typical mundanity of Ubisoft's open-world design. Proprietary game engine Snowdrop received a hefty update in its global illumination system, allowing the developer to implement hardware-accelerated ray tracing into Frontiers of Pandora, and the results are fantastic. Especially noticeable is how light and shadow interacts with detailed foliage, especially when the jungle canopy masks most of the sunlight. Here, shadows are rich, interplaying naturally with Pandora's wealth of bioluminescent flora. Marvel's Guardian of the Galaxy.
Don't worry! Once the thumpers are placed, we'll meet in the middle and we'll capture the monster. Together. Very well.
Another game on this rundown that didn't launch with ray tracing but instead included it in a subsequent upgrade, and whilst it added just minor improvement to Diablo 4's graphics, the effects is a lot more pronounced with Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. The game's ray tracing graphics mode improves fidelity, albeit capped at 30 FPS, whilst RT reflection substantially improves, you guessed it, reflections. Materials appear more tangible, with light refracting and diffusing off surfaces correctly, depending on what that specific material is. The cost here is resolution, but when the ray tracing looks this good, it might just be worth the switch. Portal with RTX. Despite releasing in 2007, Portal's gameplay remains cutting edge, blending technicality and intuition to craft its wealth of mind-melting puzzles. Its graphics are still serviceable too, however, with 2022's free RTX DLC, Portal's graphics have been brought bang up to date. Principal in this update is a smorgasbord of ray tracing effects. Light bounces realistically off surfaces and materials, responding to a level-specific geometry, volumetric ray trace lighting filters lifelike through fog and smoke. Indirect lighting organically illuminates and darkens. Shadows, for their part, are rich with detail too. Portal with RTX looks great, although as is typical, numerous Steam reviews are reporting awful drops in performance. Black Myth: Wukong. One of the best looking games on the horizon has been confirmed by Nvidia to launch with full ray tracing and DLSS 3.5. In one of Black Myth Wukong's promo videos, we get to see core glimpses of this ray tracing in action. Full ray trace water caustics and reflections present lifelike shimmer to pools and streams. Full ray trace global illumination bathes indoor spaces in diffused sunlight, its beams bouncing authentically off a range of rugged materials. Fully ray traced shadows add believable detail to forest glades as the shadows cast by tree branches quiver with realism. The only question mark here is why Nvidia opted not to show a side-by-side comparison in their video. If we don't see these same scenes with RTX off, how can we know just how much ray tracing is adding? The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt Next Gen Update.
Don't let him touch his breath!
Well, how long you gonna make me wait?
Speaking of side-by-side comparisons, it's wild to look at The Witcher 3's OG graphics to see how flat its lighting was before turning ray tracing on via its 2022 next-gen update. The effect is most dramatic in internal spaces. Shadows dominate scenes where previously there was none, adding richness, depth, and a truer conveyance of space. 9 years after release, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt isn't a bad-looking game, which is just as well, seeing as the ray tracing effects on the next-gen update were so poorly implemented that the game ran horribly when engaged. For spellbinding captures in photo mode, ray tracing is definitely the way to go. For smooth gameplay, opt for performance. A Plague Tale Requiem. For all of its grimness, A Plague Tale Requiem has always been a stunning game, and thanks to a stealthy update, which arrived some 3 months after release, the game received a subtle visual upgrade in the form of ray trace shadows. Now, the keyword here is subtle, but side-by-side comparisons do demonstrate a deeper contrast in shaded areas. Squint and it's definitely there, a beautiful looking game looks a tad better. The best thing about this update is that enabling ray trace shadows has minimal negative effect on performance, so even modest rigs can keep it on.
Here comes the Sorcerer's Army!
I see them! We'll save your land, my king! One down!
Yes!
Far Cry 6. Far Cry 6 has 2 independent settings for ray trace shadows and reflections, and sure enough, turn both these settings on and you'll be treated to increased vibrance in reflections, with light bouncing off buildings into puddles looking especially sublime. Shadow details, as we've seen throughout this feature, adds much needed depth and complexity to environments. It's hard to notice a massive difference unless the effects are compared side by side, but the increased detail and contrast in dark notes gives Far Cry 6 a greater sense of place. Shadows follow the shape of the terrain much more authentically than the hard-edged shadows we see when ray tracing is turned off. Given the game's setting is integral to the story the developers are trying to tell, anything that enhances its believability is definitely welcome. Marvel's Spider-Man 2.
You're not taking him!
You are naive! They are out!
Let's see you try!
Those left!
Unique to Marvel's Spider-Man 2 in terms of ray tracing is developer Insomniac's decision to place the tech into every graphics mode in the game. Both fidelity and performance mode operate at different frame rates, of course, but scrutinizing fidelity mode reveals a big effort on the developer's part to add as much sparkling reflection into every surface they can. Screenshots don't really do the reflective water and glistening glass and chrome justice. You've got to slow Spidey down to really appreciate the detail here. You might wonder if the frame rate hit is worth it for a game with such rapid traversal, but you can't argue the success Insomniac have achieved to render Manhattan in sublime reflective glory. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.